Right, well, welcome back to Fine Insight. So we've got some pretty spicy topics today. Let's kick off with the fights happening in 2 weeks then. Anthony Joshua, Francis Ngannou. What happens in that fight if Francis Ngannou wins? There's been a trailer that's been dropped quite recently. I think everyone's super stoked for that fight right now.
Yeah. I think it's just Francis Ngannou. Can he make lightning strike twice? I know that there's quite a few people who feel like he was robbed last time, so I think this is a great chance for redemption. Albeit sort of, as I said, a lot of people thought he was robbed last time. But do you think lightning's going to strike twice? Do you think Ngannou's going to win this? And if he does, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, so I put some thought into this. If you count being in the shower thinking about it as thought, deep thought. Basically, the conclusion I came to is, do you believe that Tyson Fury took him seriously? If you believe the answer to that question is yes, then I think you have to admit that Francis probably wins the fight. If you believe that Tyson Fury didn't take him seriously, then that amazing performance was a result of more Tyson Fury underperforming than Francis Ngannou doing amazing well, even though he did do very well. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he didn't take him seriously, which is a double negative way of saying he took him seriously. And I think that when he fights Anthony Joshua, look, I'm going all chips on Anthony Joshua. Sorry, on Francis Ngannou in this fight. Okay. I think he takes it. I think it's going to be a very amazing fight because Anthony Joshua is so orthodox and it's so fun to watch. But I genuinely think that Francis has got what it takes to win this.
So I think it's probably going to be Joshua. And here's my thought process. Tyson Fury, very specific way that he likes to fight especially against big power punchers like Deontay, etc. So walks in, puts his body weight on the fighter, leans on them, tires them out, hangs on the neck. Do you know what I mean? Punch and clutch. A lot of this. Now, Ngannou obviously was very, very ready for that. Made sure that he couldn't lean on him, made sure he couldn't keep his weight on him, counter punches, all the rest of this. If you are Anthony Joshua and you are watching that Tyson Fury fight, first of all, you don't want to be the guy that gets beaten by the MMA guy, right? You don't want to be the guy who's questioning whether or not you took it seriously or not. You're definitely going to take him super seriously. But the real thing is, are you going to have a game plan that is going to work? Because you cannot come out with the same game plan that Tyson Fury did. You're not the same size as Tyson Fury. You're a lot smaller. Do you know what I mean? So I'm wondering here is if Anthony Joshua is going to be really boxing centric in the way that he applies this, and he's going to, instead of trying to tire Ngannou down a bit or wear him out, whether he's going to come out and they're going to be having an actual boxing exchange the whole time. In which case, I think Joshua.
Well, the thing is, I think with Tyson Fury, he's very unorthodox. But one comment that Francis Ngannou made, which I thought was really astute, actually, is that he had to find the stuff that worked in the fight. It wasn't always a case of game plan. They game planned very well. But even within the fight, he found a great success with that left straight down the barrel. So I feel like Francis Ngannou has demonstrated that he can actually come in there and be creative.
That's interesting.
But I guess when you fight Anthony Joshua, you're basically fighting the fundamentals. You're fighting against the principles. And if you were going to say that an MMA, if I just forget those guys, right? MMA guys can transfer to boxing. One of the biggest pluses for the MMA guy is the footwork. It's the unorthodox strikes and unorthodox attacks that he's going to come with, and some of the stuff they can do in the clinch. So you would maybe start to think, actually, okay, I quite like how unorthodox that Francis Ngannou is going to be. But I feel for AJ, it's a bit of a lose-lose scenario. If he loses, he'll be disowned by the boxing community like that. No question about it. I have literally no doubt he'll have been washed up. He never should have been in there, and they will turn on pariahs the morning after. But I just think it's an exciting fight. What was also really interesting to me is it's 10 rounds versus 12. So that shows, I think, an awareness on Ngannou who pushed for that. Although he did so well across 12 rounds, I feel what we're going to see when he steps in now is going to be pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think both of these guys have the ability to actually end it at any point. Both of them are power punchers. Both of them have had finishes with straight shots or looping shots or anything else along those lines. I can't help but think that Anthony Joshua is not the type of guy who's going to bring a war to Ngannou. He is the type of guy who's going to display a level of caution. I think he's going to display a level of professionalism, and I think what we might end up with here is actually quite a boring boxing fight.
I think you might be completely right with that, because AJ, if he's smart, if he just sticks to the fundamentals, stays behind a heavy jab, and then throws the combinations as they appear, Ngannou's got to kind of create those opportunities against him, right? And how do you do that when they're not being quirky and leave those kind of opportunities? If he just sticks to the fundamentals, very crisp, clean, boring boxing, kind of like a la the Klitschko reign, right? Very, very. He just basically built a career from the Mason jab and all of stuff around it. So it could result in quite a boring fight. And you know, bro, especially because it's been marketed as Knockout City. It's like, name me a fight where it's said this is Knockout Town, like where it's not been a complete disaster. Like,
what do you think? Okay, let's flip this on its head. What do you think the world would look like if Anthony Joshua knocked Ngannou out quite comfortably in the first 4 rounds? What do you think the world?
Wow, I mean, that's just. I mean, I think Ngannou in that scenario goes back to MMA. You know, has to dominate that guy that just be.
Realistically, do you think Ngannou's actually going to go back to MMA? I know I heard reports that he actually, you know, they've got the idea that they want him to do after the next boxing match, but like, probably once you've tasted that sweet nectar of like boxing millions, do you know
this is what's so annoying, because like I the fight that we want to see Ngannou Jones, want to see Ngannou Aspinall, and he's like, dude, he's the MMA, arguably the best heavyweight MMA fighter out there on the planet, and it's just crap that he's not actually fighting MMA. Just from like a fan's perspective, like, I want to see the best beat the best. Like, that's what I want to see. And I'm not saying that because there just happens to be more money in boxing. But at the same time, I kind of want him to get what's best for him, right? I want him to go out there and make the money and demonstrate. But I feel like he is going for like, I feel like if there were 1,000 dimensions, they would say, imagine a world where Francis Ngannou captures a heavyweight boxing. Well, we might be in that 1 in a million like planet, the multiverses, where he actually does it. So I feel like the historic nature of what he can do is almost like, okay, let's just all argue that you've beaten the MMA stuff, because people are always going to talk. Like, even when John Jones went on that killer, like, you know, that gauntlet of death across like heavyweight division, where he beat, you know, Rashad and Rampage and Lyoto, all those guys, there were still people like, when he cleaned it out, they were like, oh, well, you haven't fought Ryan Bader yet. It's like, no, he hasn't, but, you know, he will probably win the fight, right? So I feel like you can't actually ever clear out a division and there'd be no questions, because the second from the top 10 gets a good win, questions start appearing. So when is enough enough? It would be my question.
Yeah, I think in terms of Ngannou coming back to MMA, I think with him being signed to the PFL just had their sort of Bellator versus PFL championship event in Riyadh, and PFL only had 1 victory out of those champion versus champions, and it was at heavyweight. It was Ryan Bader who lost that. He got TKO'd, I believe, quite quickly. And you've got yourself a big, reasonable heavyweight there, a guy with a title, a guy who can put an argument up saying, you know, look, I'm arguably the best heavyweight outside of the UFC. You know, I beat the Bellator guy. I'm top of PFL. I don't know exactly who one's got to put forward as a champion there, and I know obviously Philip DeFries in KSW, but that's a great way of saying, like, look, I am the man to take on Francis Ngannou. There's a really good storyline here. I've like unified the championships. Let's go for it. I actually think, you know, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but something that I really like to talk about. There used to be this time, which I think we're still in, where, you know, Conor wants to go off and box Floyd Mayweather, that Ngannou wants to go off and box Tyson Fury, these sort of things, right? But like, when I think about this and think about the actual, even the conversation of Ngannou going back to MMA afterwards, there was this time where boxing was so far ahead of MMA. Like, it's, you know, it's that established sport that's been around for hundreds of years, so far ahead of MMA. And it's like, you know, everybody's talking about paydays being crap in MMA, paydays being great in boxing. But I don't know about you, but I feel like I can see the light at the end of that tunnel. I feel like if boxing and MMA were this far away before, it's getting closer and it's getting closer and it's getting closer. And like, back in the day, you know, Conor's a massive star, but Floyd Mayweather is the A-side to that engagement, right? Who is the A-side now? Is it Ngannou or is it Joshua?
Well, that's a good question, actually, because the analogy that I would use is you had like a boxing audience and you had like an MMA audience, and these crossover fights of like, it's like kind of like 2 big YouTubers doing a collab saying, hey, now you want to see the second part of the video, go check out this guy. And it's like, we get this like cross mergence. So like, if I spoke to like, I'd call it MMA casual, somebody but doesn't really follow the sport, like they probably couldn't name it in the top 5, but they know the big names. They're like Nate Diaz and Sean Strickland. They get really excited about the big MMA fights. So I feel like when we've had these like crossover fights, I feel like the fighters are starting to get used to these names and stuff. But like, I guess like when I was 10 years old, I remember seeing like a UFC 1 like thing, and I was like, oh man, that just seems like, that sounds brutal. And obviously now like fucking couldn't be bigger like into MMA. And so like, you know, I started off just like loving boxing, not a big fan of MMA. Then I realized how vulnerable you are. Like, oh my gosh, like, I need to learn grappling like right now. So it's like, And I feel like everyone's got to go on that transition, which happens with time. So all that to say, I feel like MMA is growing faster and boxing is not growing. I actually think boxing is shrinking. It's like getting less interesting. Even the diehard fans, I actually, and I challenge anyone watch this video actually, like, find me a boxing fan that thinks like boxing is in the best state. Like, people still talk about the 80s. Like, they consistently talk about Mike Tyson. Like, no one's talking about 1990s MMA unless it's a joke. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like we all want about the right now era. Maybe you think about McGregor's rise as like a cool thing like 5 years ago, but like MMA is looking forward, boxing is looking backwards.
100%. I mean, like, I think it is worth saying that, like, I don't think there's many MMA fighters alive from the 80s, 90s, and early noughties that could technically hang with almost any other fighters from today. But you can't say that about boxing. You know, you can say that Tyson, if you had Mike Tyson in his prime now, I mean,
they still talk about that. He's like still the unlockable character. Can you imagine that guy like? Some of the UFC 1 fighters been unlockable characters, like
it's crazy.
Do you know what I mean?
Like, I just pagged him in like 10 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Like
a few calf kicks, yeah.
Not to even shit on Hoyce Gracie, just a literal change in the levels of technique.
That's how
you know what I mean.
We've got, yeah.
Guys jumping back on heel hooks in like the early UFC, just like, just fall backwards to see what happens. Like, the guy got up. What the fuck?
I wonder if you could like beat like the whole UFC 1 with like, let's just pick any top 10 fighter you want from the lightweight division. Okay, today's standard has to be every weight, like it has to be heavyweight. Like, do you think maybe Islam Makhachev would be able to beat everybody UFC 1 heavyweights?
Like? So somebody like that, and Islam Makhachev or Bryce Mitchell, which one? Is he lightweight or is he feather?
I'm not sure actually. We're checking out, but
I think maybe feather. But like somebody who like that style where if they get a hold of you, they're really technical. Do you know the guy who I think would be like, who would just kill the sport but make that sort of thing stand out? It's like somebody like Ben Askren, right? Send Ben Askren back, and he just, or John Fitch, and he just like lazy grapple fucks as everybody with ease. Do you know what I mean?
Everyone all through the event and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get across. Like in terms of level of technique, like the difference is just absolutely monumental.
Well, so today we're going to cover Izzy Khamzat and a few like MMA social media stuff, but that level thing brings on to like, you obviously, you know, people watch the podcast know you have your own like fight promotion, which is so sick that you have that.
Thank you, bro.
But we had that at the weekend, right? It was like, dude, like I unfortunately couldn't be the person, but just watching like teammates fight, you're like, oh my, like you get so invested, like way more than like even when like, you know, your favorite UFC fighters are watching, like, so like emotionally it's like, dude, it's like so intense when like your friends are fighting, your teammates.
Yeah, and this is something that one of our cornermen, a guy called Stuart Graham, who runs Hit Squad Hull, long-time friend of mine, and guy who I've had in the corner for most of our guys because he's a really sharp mind. He actually made a point that just has resonated and stuck with me this whole time, which is that like fighters have like a physical payoff. They win, their emotions go nuts. They lose, their emotions go down. They have this like, there's life changes, right? So fighter gets ready for their fight. They get into shape, they make the weight, they go out there, they fight, win, lose or draw. Life is different afterwards. Your record is different. Like you've learned something, you maybe take some physical damage, maybe you don't, anything along those lines. But whatever happens, win or lose, you have a payoff. You have this like, okay, I lost. Okay, I won. Like, right, time to go celebrate, time to go commiserate, whatever. But as a coach, like, you're just on to the next guy, right? So like I had 6 guys on at the weekend, and as we went through the card, like the first guy lost like a razor close decision. I think it could have been a 10-8 in the last round, so it could have been a draw. If he'd have won, there'd have been an argument for it, but really, really close. And obviously, like, there's this sort of balance there where I'm really happy with the way he performed in his debut, but I'm upset for him that he lost, and like, blah, 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 blah. But there's like more than just like yay or no boo. Like, he's safe, great. He lost, boo. He was really close, yay.
Yeah.
He performed really well, yay. You know, all of these different things, and then he goes back to the locker room, put some ice on his eye, and then the next guy goes out for me. Do you know what I mean? So I have this like blip. Do you know what I mean? Whereas for him, it's like blip. You know?
Yeah.
And then the next guy goes out, and that's Louis Power. And Louis Power like is like the absolute prototypical like professional amateur. Like weight cut amazing, game plan amazing, and we just basically did the Islam Volk game plan of Southpaw versus Orthodox, except he's Orthodox. So body kick, head kick, body kick, head kick. Head kick, right?
It was an amazing performance. His weight gain was like, it's got to be like professional, comparable with like
yeah. So he's like I learned a lot from watching Mark Diakese cut, because Mark cuts a lot of weight. So I really can kind of see like, okay, this is about the limit of the spectrum that I'd want, particularly for amateur. Like, you don't want those guys stressing their kidneys too much or anything along those lines. But Louis Power has like studied the Dolce diet. He's studied a bunch of these different guys who do the fight dietitian is the one that he's talking about at the moment, and he's got like everything from the water cut to how you manipulate your salts to how you pull your glycogen out of your system. And then we based our rehydration protocol off one of Mark Diachese's camp rehydrations, and we just obviously modify it for size and calories and all the rest of it. But that means that he's putting back on about 20 pounds for lightweight.
That's
maybe a bit
insane,
more.
isn't it? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but again, like...
But this is level
he's
we're at
fit.
now.
Yeah, he's fit. He's ready to fight. He's not suffering any cardio. He actually looked better this time, and he cut a tiny bit more this time. So,
But what's amazing to me is like we see these fights like the Volk Islam thing, and then we see it play out at amateur, and it's like we go through these like metas in MMA, and it's so like being able to like study that and say like, wow, that's so sick. And then when you suddenly next card, you see that technique being implemented, and it kind of changes all the time. But what's cool to me is that actually, if you watch like a regional MMA event, you probably learn like way loads about the sport, and just watching like consistent things that you see through, you can kind of like get a kind of macro picture of it, right?
100%. I think like this is one thing that like people don't realize when you watch like two elite black belts roll, like often there's a lot of not much, and then these bursts of like really intricate flow. Do you know what I mean? So. But what's actually happening there is these two black belts, when they meet, there's a lot of like, okay, I play A, well, I cancel out your A. Okay, I play B, well, I cancel out your B. Okay, well, I play C, well, I cancel out your C. And there's a lot of this like micro battles to just sort of try and find a read that's going to help the person. And this happens at high level MMA as well. You watch Usman versus Leon, for example, and there's this real sort of like, okay, I'm going to use my footwork, I'm going to use my positioning in the cage. Okay, well, I'm going to try my takedowns, I'm going to use my anti-grappling. And it's like, you know, what you didn't see there was Usman passing guard. You didn't get a chance to get to that because of the nullifications that happened earlier.
And the levels for your like standard observer they've missed like 95% of the battles that are happening.
100%.
Even in the striker, like someone did a breakdown of like Ngannou when he knocked out, I forgot who it was actually, but he basically kept throwing left hook, right uppercut, and then he threw the left uppercut, which he'd set up, which you would completely miss unless you actually know what you were looking for. Mm-hmm. But you just don't. People don't understand. They think, "Oh, this is really boring," or not much is happening. Like, no. A million things are happening. Yeah, you start spotting them.
But amateur, that's not so much the case. At amateur, people make mistakes. People leave their hand down and their chin up. People circle the wrong way. People do things that they shouldn't do. They switch stances, and they don't know how to fight out of that stance, or they might be forced into switching stances to the low kicks or something. They back themselves onto the fence due to fear, like Mateus' opponent walking him down. Do you know what I mean?
So let's talk about that. So Mateus, like world level striker, you know, you don't have to be Mystic Mac to predict that he's going to want to like strike with you, right? So like you wear a lot of hats. You've got the trainer hat, you've got the event hat. Obviously, you manage that really well. When you're game planning for somebody who is like a predominant striker at professional level, you're thinking about how can I keep this fight standing and get back up.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from that fight in particular when you watched it? I think it'd be good just to share like lessons learned and stuff.
So it's important that I think, so first of all, like we did a different game plan for each of the 6 fighters. You know, I mean, everybody had a slightly different game plan, which makes it like they work on their own stuff through camp. So for Mateus, it was very much like getting back up off the floor, building back up along the fence. Do you know what I mean? And making sure that like Ross, who's his opponent, very, very, very good guy, finishes most of his guys in the first round because he's so dangerous. So statistically, if he gets out of the first round, then he loses the fight statistically. Obviously, he's a good pro. So for Mateus, it was about not making any mistakes in the first round. And then as we got into that first round, the idea was circle off the fence, box, don't give him any kicks that he can catch, don't be standing on one leg, keep your ability to counter his southpaw stance. Okay, so but what Ross didn't do is he didn't come out in southpaw and then like step towards Mateus. He literally like walked forward, like Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya, but without the idea of compromising his ability to throw wide hooks, but actually just to get in your face and get his hands locked around you. The second thing that Ross did that I thought was really, really good was he was very, 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 and actually we've started to do our own drills based off what Ross did. He was very, very good about not only did he not have a stance for you to counter, because all he did was walk at you super quick. So he wasn't in orthodox, he wasn't in southpaw, he just walked you down. But when he shot, he was so unbelievably like confident and persistent that his hands were going to get locked. And so what we've done is we got a lot of counter body lock work, a lot of like, you know, the guy doesn't get his hands locked against the fence, you know, because once a guy gets his hand locked, you're going to go for a ride. You know what I mean? So we basically had covered every area except for the worst eventuality. And the worst eventuality we had options for, but I wasn't expecting Ross to be quite so walk through the fire. Do you know what I mean? Because if you've got like the promised land is behind the blender of Mateus's elbows and punches and kicks and all the rest of it, people aren't usually that willing to just wander into the blender. Do you know what I mean? And then Ross sprinted quite clean through the blender and did a fantastic job and held him down for 2 rounds before Mateus managed to reverse it.
And that's so interesting because he Ross is phenomenal at what he does. What was interesting to me is like I've never seen a guy close the distance like that, like after bell rings, like boom.
Against Mateus of all people, man, you're walking through knees and elbows to get to that, and they're like he like in fairness, Mateus should have circled early and kept it on the feet a little bit more, but he did a fantastic job. And once he got Mateus down, like obviously I was surprised that the referee didn't stand it up a little bit quicker in round one.
Especially after the fight before that, which just people didn't get card, like was the exact same thing, but that fight got still. It's just different ref, I think, and that's the variability of the game, I think.
Yeah, it didn't help that I was shouting at him as well. That's not top tip, if you want the referee to do something, don't scream at him to do it, because he's probably not. Stand him up, ref, what are you doing?
Do you think then, like, you can get, like, I want to say do you think that, like, you can almost you expect, because you've talked about it in one of your first fights, right? You were like, if he's being intelligent, he'll do A or B, and then he does, like, the thing you're not expecting, and it just happens to be effective, like.
Yeah, so, like, I've talked about a bunch of times where I shot a double leg on somebody, I pinned him to the fence, and instead of him like finding underhooks, he just punched me in the ribs. And I remember he just was like, and just hit me around the side. And I remember being like, bro, you're supposed to fucking fight hands here. You're supposed to stop me from taking you down. The guy just leaned over and hit me in the ribs. And I'm like, that really hurt.
Really powerful,
I wasn't expecting it. Or there's another time I took the guy down. And in fact, same guy, same thing. Like I took him down, got onto top position, head position into it, and he just hit me in the ribs from the bottom again. And I just remember thinking like, you're not supposed to do that. It's like the guy who knocked the guy out from bottom mount, if you remember KSW. And it's just like, cool, but cool. You know, cool, I mean, like, you're not supposed to do that, but yes, okay. Like Rashawn this weekend, one of our guys finished by triangle, and he was supposed to work back to the feet and go back to striking, and he got taken, he slipped, and he ended up in bottom close guard. And it was like, okay, Rashawn, let's work the stand-ups that we've worked for the last 10 weeks. Okay, he's in a triangle. Okay, he's tapped out. Well done, Rashawn.
Well, I'm sure he wouldn't mind sharing, but like he did that exact same thing in a training session.
Yes,
didn't he? I mean, that's so funny. Like, actually, like,
I mean, like this is a thing that we talked about in past on the podcast. Is like it's really useful for fighters to have a hammer of Thor. It's really like like Conor McGregor straight left, Rashawn it's his triangle. You know what I mean? Like Louis Power is some of his kicks, for example, or his cage wrestling. So it's really useful for a fighter to have this thing that like, if I'm going to beat you and I'm going to beat you comprehensively, it'll be through this. That's
amazing, man. I think the last point of the amateur bit, like circling that all off, is like I've seen like a lot more amateurs now who have like 18, 19 fights. Like, do you think amateur careers are getting longer? And like, what do you think about like those amateurs transition to pro? Because I guess like the way I look at it is like, I guess amateur is like just do all of your learning in amateur, and then when you feel like, okay, like I actually feel like I can compete at a very, very high level, then you transition to pro. Because I guess you don't want to go too soon. Right, I mean, like no one really remembers your amateur record, so it's like almost no point if you're going pro. Yeah.
I feel like the only time people remember your amateur record is if it's memorable. Like Mohamed Mokayev having like a super long amateur record of people and not being defeated, or George Staines going 17-1. But realistically, like I feel like your amateur career is like, have you figured out your right weight class? Have you figured out like the style that you want to play? Have you got enough experience that like at pro, the first time you get kicked in the balls, you're not just going like, what is this? How am I supposed to fight through this? Or you've been poked in the eye. You've got that like seasoned sort of like time behind you. You've had a bad weight cut and you've managed to fight through it. You've had like that day where you've somewhat feels a bit off because of the way you rehydrate. You've had that day where you've had to change plan A, plan B. And for some fighters, it's that you've had a loss. You know what I mean? That sort of invulnerability. Like I think it was always one of the best things for George Staines was to have that loss at the end of his amateur record, because first of all, it wasn't the end of the world and he needed to know that. But second of all, it's like, bro, like this is not going to happen again. Let's fucking do some work.
Do you know what's so funny? Because I was only thinking about it from a technical point of view, but actually I think you make a really good point. It's actually all the crap around it, like bouncing back from a loss is like, McGregor Diaz is a good example. Like all the stuff like getting poked in the eye. It's like all the non-relevant, obviously you're improving, right? But it's like the non-core stuff that you want to know. Yeah. So you actually become seasoned and like experience.
Absolutely. And I mean, like this is another thing. It's like the first fight you ever have, like I feel like you perform significantly less, unless you're that guy, because you're just like trained emotionally from having sat in a locker room for 3 or 4 hours and going through the medicals and getting your hands wrapped and doing a warm-up and all of these things that are really functionally quite alien compared to how you train. Like, you'll do a warm-up, you know what I mean? You'll get your wraps on and everything, but it's just different enough that it messes with your head a little bit. And you see those guys who are at their like 10th fight, 15th fight that you talked about, and it's just
another day in the office.
Just another day in the office.
Just another day.
And you ask those guys, what is fighting like? Fighting is 3 or 4 hours sat in a locker room, and then I go out and it's done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's funny. So pivoting a little bit then, actually. So like one of the big fights coming up we have to talk about is Khamzat versus Izzy.
Yeah, buddy.
That's a funny one, actually. Like, here's the thing: if Izzy's coming back off a layoff, right? When he comes back, I feel like he needs to come back and I'm telling you what he needs to do, but comes back and like make a dominant statement, because you only really get to come back off a layoff once. I feel like if I'm speaking about like the MMA collective hive mind, they don't mind you going away, recollecting yourself, but you can't like leave, come back, then leave for a bit, then come back. Like, you really want to come back and make a big statement piece.
Activity.
Yeah, and Khamzat's like, mate, he's that line. He's not been active, but he's that line at the top of the division. He's ready to make a statement and become double, maybe triple champ. So it's a perfect.
He's been dominant enough that he's the A side, right? He's been dominant enough that people are just like, man, who's going to beat Khamzat and how are they going to do it?
Yes.
You know, and if you look at Izzy versus Khamzat, like, I mean, who would you pick as the favorite for that fight? Interesting question.
I'd put Khamzat as a favorite.
Really interesting, right?
I would do, yeah. And the reason for that is because even though Izzy's got more championship experience, he's been out of the cage for slightly longer. And like when he fought light heavyweight, what's his name, the former champ, Blachowicz was able to take him down and keep him there. And obviously Izzy's good off his back and whatnot, but I think Khamzat's wrestling. You've just got to be so. I mean, look what he did to Kamaru Usman round 1. I don't know, man. That's a tough
Short
fight.
notice, Kamaru Usman.
Short notice. But Kamaru Usman's like a weight class higher. Like, I feel like he's more energized and stuff. And obviously I love Kamaru Usman, one of my favorite fighters, but I don't know. I just feel like Khamzat's just like a marauder. I don't want to like take like a traditional basic perspective on it, but like I do think he's just that good, and he's also not that bad on the feet either.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the blueprint, like, so there's fighters that they talk about having the blueprint sort of solved for. So like Edson Barboza, you just walk that guy down, and then you're going to have a great chance at winning that fight.
Give him no space.
I thought Sean Strickland had a really, I mean, he did the Ross Cooper. He just walked him down, didn't he? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so I wonder if Izzy likes to stand at range, kicks, like leading hooks, all the rest of those. Is that really going to be there against somebody who's basically Sean Stricklanding, but on 1.3 speed? Do you know what I mean?
1.3 speed, yeah. And the shots and the angles it comes at as well is just so difficult to like.
It's a nightmare matchup, isn't he? You know, but like the other thing is Izzy is big. Khamzat can make 170. Do you know what I mean? Izzy can make 205. Like, there's a difference here. So like, I think Blachowicz and Khamzat are like, it's a good comparison in the sense that that's what happened. But I think Khamzat is not going to have anywhere near the weight on him.
No, but you see, I don't think weight's the determining factor in taking Izzy down. Like, I feel like obviously it helped, but I feel like Khamzat's wrestling skill surmounts the weight differential. And actually, it's weird, like wrestling as well. Like, you don't realize how much weight does make a difference. Like, if someone's significantly heavier, like, it makes a massive difference in wrestling.
Yep.
You only really realize that if you wrestle someone who's a lot heavier than you are. You realize just how much of it.
They have to have like a base level of ability as well. But you wrestle somebody who's like 15 pounds heavier than you, but 10% worse. It's still just like really hard.
But it's
really, really hard.
To be fair, like, to contradict myself, like, you take Paulo Costa, who looked phenomenal in his last fight, but he wasn't able to action his like wrestling against Izzy when they fought as much, was he? Izzy neutralized that. So, but again, he's not the same level as Khamzat on the wrestling. So,
yeah, just love to see it though, right?
Love to see it. I think it's going to be a big one. And I would probably say Khamzat takes that. They push ahead with that for sure.
What do you think? Do you think Khamzat? Because you're assuming that's going to be 5 rounds, right?
Yeah.
When Khamzat fought Gilbert Burns in that 3rd round, was that 3 or was that 5?
No,
that was 5.
Was it? There was just 3 round, I think. Yeah, it was 3. Yeah, 3 5s.
Jamie pulled that up. Yeah. But I thought he, you know, when he was put under adversity, he got tired. Do you know what I mean? So if you were in Izzy's shoes, were you just banking on a 4th or 5th round finish? Do you know what I mean? Like, stifle him for the 1st round, try and make him burn a shit ton of energy. Do you know what I mean? And
I think that's the wise thing to do. Because like, if you look at his record, like you could say the Kamara fight, he did lose a bit of energy, but he said he broke his hand. But like, I always feel like Khamzat like needs to go on that like economy. You know, when Uberim went to be Econoreem, where he like paced himself a little bit more, and then we had Ngannou after Miocic, he then became a little bit more stable. I feel like Khamzat, like, we love him because he comes out like 1,000,000,000%, kind of like McGregor in that sense. But like, I feel like if he could like pace himself down a little bit, that would be like the smart thing for him to do, like have those bursts of aggression. But if you're Izzy, yeah, dude, you want to like your chance to win the fight, like you say, statistically, going up the longer you can draw that fight out. So he wants to keep it. But the question is, can he keep it standing for as long as possible?
Yeah, because Khamzat only has to win over half of 3 rounds, doesn't he? It's not a tremendous amount of time, you know?
No.
So, difficult.
Difficult one, yeah. And then, you know, that segues quite nicely into, like, we talked about, like, so you were familiar with, like, George Hardwick, right? Like, we've seen some events. He's a really cool dude. He puts, like, amazing MMA content.
I really like his way. His mind is true.
Yeah, and he's really good teacher. But like, he actually said recently that like he's stopping like posting as much MMA content because I think he had a couple of reasons. One is that like he was checking his phone a lot, which everyone can like relate to.
Yeah.
Like you're on social media, you're like, oh my gosh, and you're like serotonin boost.
Yep.
The other one is that like his opponent game plan for his fight off the back of his content, which I thought was like really interesting. Like I don't know if like George is putting out like his, I don't know, his like key strategies or like what, but like but that it's you want to talk about the stuff you're working on, right? You want to share, oh my gosh, check this cool thing out. And like, obviously, if you're fighting George, you'd be like, well, I'm definitely going to do my research, right? So
yeah, Ross Cooper for Mateus had a podcast, and he went on the podcast, and it literally was like, he went on the podcast the same day that he weighed in. So he was like, yeah, you know, cut went quite well, sitting around 99 kilos, and I knew Mateus was going to be a little bit heavier than that. Do you know what I mean? After the full rehydration and everything. So I was like, sick, that's good to know. Do you know what I mean? So I can fully understand. In today's day and age, if you're an athlete, you want to be making content, like you really do. Like content is going to be one of those things that's going to send your career to the next level. Just think, you know, who would Conor McGregor be without fantastic content? You know what I mean? Like, he just wouldn't be that guy, right? So content's super important, but like, there's that like want to put out incredible content, and obviously that's that want to put out the things that you're really, really most intimately familiar with. And I've just got this image of George. I know he did it, but can you imagine being like my coach hates me as like the thumbnail, and it's just like the top 3 things that I'm gonna do to win this fight. Then the next video is how to counter the top 3 things that I'm gonna do to win this fight. You know what I mean? Just like content for his opponent. Like
but it's tough though, bro. Like I feel like even if you're not trying to give away your A game, you are going to say like, oh, what I really like to do here is I'm looking for this. Like you're just naturally going to share your little insights and stuff.
Absolutely.
And if you're a opponent, you want to make it difficult for him to get those reads in the ring. You think, okay, what's he doing? But when you're watching the content, you're like, oh, okay, cool. So now I know when he does this, he's probably thinking this. It's so tough because like we're saying, we advise everyone want to be a MMA fighter, you need to build social, you need to build online following. How do you do that without giving your? It's so difficult to do. Like.
I think the thing is as well, it's like recognize your audience. Like George Hardwick, like I mean, he does put out good technique. He does put out great technique. That's true. Do you know what I mean? But I remember most of the sort of like explosion in audience that he got was after one fight. He was like super emotional and just screamed like, "Get this man a pizza!" Do you know? And it just lives in my brain because it was just so random, but yet so. It's like angry, concerned for his opponent who's been through an ordeal and now deserves pizza. Do you know?
Exactly
I just like I love that. Or like there was one point where he finishes the fight and he's like, yeah, punch me in the face and now I'm spitting blood from deep in my duodenum or something. You know, he's talking like he's just using these really technical words, and I just like, again, just like had me spitting out my coffee. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the thing that people want. It's like they want charisma. Like Conor McGregor had fantastic charisma. Ronda Rousey is in the WWE now, which is literally just charisma, you know, monetized, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You look through Sean Strickland, whether you love him or hate him, he's charismatic. You have an opinion. You're not neutral or on the fence for Sean. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. And I think I want some advice for George. It'd be like, yes, monitor your usage of it, but actually, like, are people coming to you for like professional level advice, or are they coming to you for your personality, your fresh takes on things, your breakdowns, and like, could that actually be done at like a level that's maybe more like amateur, that isn't necessarily like, you know, the secret codes and the vault of like your strategy? Because like this stuff compounds, man. Like, and you know, these are the guys that buy the tickets, these are the guys that show up for you, and like as you continue to progress your career, I mean, it's a big effect. You actually arrive with an audience ready to take over and stuff. So
Yep.
I'd say it's a real shame if he does take a step back, but I don't think it's an either or. I think both are possible.
Yeah.
You just got to kind of calibrate a little bit either side of it.
Just stop telling your opponent what you can
And
do.
stop giving your game plans. Yeah, that's it. Don't give away the A game.
Yeah, I mean, like, one thing I can sort of empathize with is just like, you know, you do sort of get stuck in that loop of like that never ending. How many followers have I got now? How many followers have I got now? Like, what landed, what didn't? And like, for somebody who's trying to be world champion in a certain sport, you know, you've only got so many experience points that you can put in. So if you're putting those experience points into learning how to use CapCut and like, you know, just wasting your time, and like, you know, your timer on Instagram says that you've been there for 3 hours or something absurd, then yeah, like if you're costing yourself your career. But if anything, like George Hardwick is one of those names that sticks in my head because I'm just like, if he puts me out, I'll watch it. It's entertaining. Whether that's great technique, whether that's just something funny, whether that's him and Harry. And he was like a proper Sam Sulek example of somebody who's like low budget, just picked his phone up, records himself talking about something, and it's gold.
And that's what we're talking about, like, just, and it's a good point to lay in for social, like, it's like thinking about like social media as a burger, like, you need the power, you need those universally understood concepts, you need like a good actual like personality, and the rest of it's kind of like dress up, like the letters and stuff is the editing. But it's like, you know, we talked before, didn't we, about like, do you want, like, does every video, is it gotta go to the moon? What about those videos that build like, what if you had like 100 people that turned up every single video and just had that like real emotional, real connection with you and wanted to like go on your journey? In some ways, bro, that's like way more valuable. Like, even if your purpose, right, is to like, say George says, for example, I want to monetize my audience. Okay, well, do you want like 1 million people who are kind of like, nah, it's okay, yeah, I'll swing by, I'll swing out? What if you had like 500 diehards? I'll buy George Hardwick's butter spread. Like, I absolutely want any product that butts that. I will turn up. It's like, dude, it's like the micro, the valuable stuff. And the scale just sort of happened. But this is the weird thing about social media, right? You don't control the scale. You only control like the quality of your content, and you need to hit resonance. When you've got resonance and everything's, then the scale just happens and it just gets 1,000,000x, right? But actually, it's about like, would I, if it's just a one person, would I be connecting with them? And you've had a load of hits go viral recently. Like, it'd be good to get your kind of take on that, because you've gone, well, you've been popping off on Instagram. So
yeah, it's I think like something that like, and just to relate this to George Hardwick, that's really, really important. Like, George Hardwick's following and those core audience members are not there for the technique, although a little bit. They're there for the quirky, unique character that he has, right? Same with Conor McGregor. Like, you know, there's a lot of people who've got a southpaw left straight on him, but very few of them are like eating blueberries on like an interview to calling themselves the king of lean. You know, very few people had like, I think nowadays it's a little bit different, but Conor was like one of the first people that I actually spotted prepping an answer for an interview. Do you know what I mean? And how does that relate to me, and how am I trying to take from that? Like, as much as we're putting content out for things like technique or all the rest of it, I'm really blessed to be working with Steve McBride in that one, where like it's always a bit quirky. So like, we had one where the hook was like, have you been underhooking wrong this entire time? And then the transition was Darth Vader going, no, you know. And again, it's people are coming for that, not for how to underhook correctly. They'll stay because the underhook correctly is something that they're like, okay, that's really cool. But the thing that stopped them from just scrolling to the next reel straight away was a hook, was something quirky, was something a little bit different. And it's not just like, hey, here's my, I don't know, guard pass, Darce choke, back attack, whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's very much like, here's me as a person. Do you know what I mean? Here's how I'm going to put my own twist on something that you've probably seen before. Do you know what I mean? And that's something I think George Hardwick does amazing. That's something I'm trying to do a little bit more, is put a little bit more of my
personality into
Exactly. But like, you will have seen on Instagram a bunch of like wrestling techniques, like, oh, here's a cool single leg, right? Name me 3 of those guys. Tough to do, right?
Dude, oh my gosh.
But like, if I said to you, name me 2 or 3 people who have got like quirky personalities, you could be like George Hardwick, Sam Sulek. These guys, it's the next level up of audience creation. Is like, it's a little bit more natural. You're seeing this with the thumbnails as well, right? It's like taken away from the big bright, and that actually a little bit more of a regression back to like a natural approach.
Do you know, bro, that's so interesting, because I guess it's like I even said you like wrestling stuff at the time, like about, oh, that looks amazing, like counted to the headlock, but it's like a transactional relationship as a viewer. I see it, oh, it's valuable, I'll hit that like save thing, but I don't know anything about like the guy, and it's like, you can't over optimize for views and shares and like watch time, but in reality, like, what if you got like 50% less, but you were able to, let's say you share a story like, guys, like, I really struggled with blah blah blah, and like actually, and there's a bit more context. Like I feel like I know Liam now. You've lost some audience, but what you've lost, you've traded out for that as like an exchange of like a relationship.
It's that million closer to the 100 true followers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like
I think that's really useful because like you want to have the wide net cast, you want the cool judo throw, you want the cool trip. You know what I mean? You want the cool CCTV, but realistically, like I think the thing that makes my content a little bit different there is that like the stuff that I'm posting from the CCTV is not just like, okay, takedown, guard pass, side control, mount, armbar. And then it's just a different person. But no, it's like there's some quirks, there's some flair, there's some
there's a bit of humor in there.
Yeah, we're having a good laugh in it the whole time. So I think it's very clear that like, unless it even technique stuff, there's always going to be a little bit of personality in there because like that's what I would want, right? I'd want to engage with somebody with a good personality.
And actually, bro, that's so interesting because I guess if you like take an analogy of your friendship group, do you want to have 100 friends who do lots of stuff but really superficial level? Mm-hmm. Definitely not. You'd rather have like 5 like. These are my guys, like,
100%.
But like we just invert that for social media. We want like the numbers, we want like the high statistics and the things to look at, not the actual. Oh, there's so and so who always turns up in comments and stuff. That's like really decent.
I think the emotion is really everything. So like you had one that popped off that was talking about age groups that had houses, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason why that popped off so much is because it creates an emotion. Like, oh, I'm in that group. I'm in the 22% that has a house. Yay, do you know what I mean? Or like, I'm not in that group. I'm in the 78% that don't have a house. Do you know?
Yeah, and it is creating like an emotional reaction with something. And someone's talking about, I love this. Like, I could talk about this. We could talk about this for 5 hours, but like they were talking about how if like basically you're making a video, you want to make it something that like a certain number of people could find interesting. Mm-hmm. But that's only really the case if your goal is to go mega viral. Like if every video you produce is about trying to get to 10 million people, I don't think you can do that and get depth at the same time.
It's hard, isn't it?
It's absolutely a trade-off. So I've seen some creators actually now what they do is they make the videos that go high and go deep, but then they'll also make like what they call connective content, which is, hey, this video just gets to know me a little bit better, by the way. And maybe you get less viewership, but like that's your relationship building stuff.
Yeah, I do that with like random remixed memes, and I do that also with things like seminar posts or stuff like this. So I try to have like a little bit of content that isn't like I'm gimmicky. Do you know what I mean? So like I want you to know that there's not just like I am not just a channel.
I'm not a goofball. Yeah.
Yeah, it just randomly shows like CCTV and maybe the CCTV's been contrived to have a look like that and blah blah blah. I'm not that guy. Like I am. Like
you conspiracists, where are you?
I'm like I'm gonna post the things like if there hasn't been anything interesting happening on the CCTV in 3 days, I'm not gonna post anything. I will post memes that I find funny. I will post seminar like promos and things like this because like that's also, you know, I'm a real person and I need people to come to these seminars. You know what I mean? To keep the lights on, but also just to keep the academy growing and all the rest of it. Like I try not to be too businessy on my social media, but in the same breath, like it is there for a reason, you know.
100%. We'll have to pick this up on another podcast. I think like there's a lot of detail in there, but like all I'd say, George, get back on social media.
Do it, George. Come on.